What's up trainers, Jerpy's here, and in today's video I'm going to walk you through some of the tips, tricks, and strategies that helped get me to Master Ball rank on the back of a 72% win rate, 205 total games played, and a 10-game win streak. Now the tips and tricks that I'm going to talk about can be applied to just about any deck you want to play or build. And I believe that these strategies are extremely important for limiting the impact that RNG has on your game outcomes. If you like this type of content and want to see more of it, go ahead and leave a like or a subscribe below and drop a comment if there are any tips and tricks that you've used to help climb to Master Ball this season. The first tip I want to talk about is called tempo. Tempo in gaming refers to taking game actions that intend to control the pace or the speed of the game in order to move that game into your benefit or to an outcome that you are looking for. For example, you can slow a game down in order to help build to your ultimate win condition, or you can speed a game up to run your opponent over before they get set up. Cards like Cyrus, Sabrina, Team Rocket, Grunt, and Mars are just a few of the cards that are used in the meta today in order to tempo games. Now, the great thing about cards like this is that they can be used in the early to mid game in order to tempo, in order to either stall your opponent out, throw them off their game plan, or can also be used a lot of times in the late game as a closer. In my opinion, I think the most important strategy when it comes to using these cards effectively is knowing when to save them and when to use them in order to tempo. For Sabrina, I love trying to find opportunities to use this more early on in order to throw the opponent off. For instance, so many decks really try to get a particular Pokemon in the active spot. It can be a wall while they build up their back line, or it could be an energy ramper like a Manaphy or a Moltres. And that early game Sabrina can really just throw them off and sometimes close games out before they even get started. Cyrus can do the same thing by allowing you to snipe a Pokemon while it's getting built up before it kind of hits its stage 2 and is ready to sweep the game. However, I find Cyrus to be a card I'd like to hold on to most times and use in the late game in order to close it out. Team Rocket, Grunt, and Mars, also really important cards that can be used in the late game to really save you or get out of jail free cards, or cards that can really help tempo early game. Just decelerating, one energy on your opponent sometimes is enough to completely flip the momentum of a game. For Mars, you can blow up an opponent's hand even if not getting card advantage with it, but knowing that you could be disrupting a stage 2 or stage 3 evolution, which is extremely important for their game plan and their ultimate win condition. These cards can also then be saved for late game to basically strip a Gyarados or a Charizard of all their energy when you're on your back foot, or Mars, for instance, to clear the way for a game-winning move when your opponent might be sitting on an Osiris or a red that essentially is their win condition. Either way, tempoing, knowing when to use these cards and how to use them in order to really take control of the speed of the game, thinking multiple steps ahead and how a particular tempo move will ultimately affect the outcome or the direction of the game is extremely important. And in my opinion, one of the high-level strategies that the top-ranked Master Ball players are using in order to set themselves apart. The second tip that I want to talk about is a pretty basic one, so I won't spend too much time talking about it, but you'd be surprised at how many trainers don't actually know how to simply sequence a Professor's Research and a Pokeball when you have both sitting in your hand. The general philosophy here is that if you are looking for a basic Pokemon or a specific basic Pokemon, you want to end up Professor Researching first and then using your Pokeball. This gives you more opportunities at pulling that specific Pokemon into your hand. On the other case, if you are actually looking for a specific card that is not a basic Pokemon, let's say a particular trainer card or a stage 1 or 2 evolution, generally you want to Pokeball first, or if you have 2 Pokeballs, use both of them first to thin your deck and then use the Professor's Research so that you have a higher probability of hitting those cards. Now, there are some small edge cases here that you may want to consider that rely on how many basic Pokemon you have in your deck, the importance of getting that basic Pokemon against the importance of pulling other cards or filling your hand with other non-basic Pokemon cards. What it comes down to is just looking at the probability of pulling the specific cards you're looking for and weighing how important they are to your ultimate game plan and thinking multiple steps ahead, which I'll get into in a later tip. You'd be surprised at how something this simple will radically increase the consistency of your games and their outcomes. The third tip that I want to talk about is what I call optimal card sequencing and optimal turn management. Put simply, it's to choose which cards you want to play throughout the sequence of a turn, or which cards and when to play them over the course of an entire game. Now, in Pokemon Pocket, there are tons of different examples of how to sequence cards effectively in order to increase your probability of getting the card or the outcome that you're looking for. However, in this video, I'm going to focus on 3 examples in order to make this point. The first one is around Sabrina. I love using Sabrina in the early to mid game in order to tempo an opponent, slow them down, and throw them off their game. When I do so, I like to play the Sabrina at the very beginning of my turn in order to avoid giving my opponent any additional information about what my intentions or what my strategy is. This forces them to have to make their Sabrina decision without knowing anything else about what I'm about to do for the rest of my turn, throwing them off and ideally putting them in a position where they make the wrong choice. The next example is around Professor's Research. Most people, when they draw this card or see it in their hand, they want to play it immediately. However, we are currently in a meta where there are a lot of red cards and double Marses floating around, and opponents are looking for a perfect opportunity to blow your hand up. Now, you need to ask yourself when you see this card, do I need anything that I'm looking for right now that I really need in order to move me forward in my win condition or my ultimate strategy or not? If not, sometimes it's better to hold your Professor's Research, play another supporter card, so that way if you do end up getting hit with a Mars or a red card, that research goes back in your deck and it can be redrawn in order to help you build your hand back up and gain that card advantage back. Now, another example is around how Pokéball and Pokemon communication work together in certain situations. For example, if you're playing a deck with very few basics and you've drawn all your basics out, but you're looking for a stage 2 or a stage 1 evolution, you can actually use the Pokemon communication to put a basic from your hand back into the deck, pull out that stage 1 or stage 2 Pokemon, and then use your Pokeball to fish that basic back out. And in fact, if you have another Pokeball or you have another Pokemon communication in your hand later on, you can do the same exact thing, which just gives you a slightly higher probability of being able to get the different evolutions that you might be looking for. Now, card sequencing and optimal turn management are extremely important, and there's a lot of nuance here. It's really about thinking multiple steps ahead and really trying to analyze how making a particular decision now is going to change the outcome, the direction, or the momentum of the game. And how you sequence these cards, in my opinion, is one of the high-level strategies that some of the best players in the Master Ball ranking are using in order to set themselves apart. In the fourth tip, I want to talk a little bit about breakpoints. Now, breakpoints can be evaluated at the Pokemon level, at the deck level, and also at a meta level. And when you think about breakpoints at the meta level, for example, you're thinking about the different HP values or thresholds that exist across the core Pokemon in that meta. On the flip side, you also want to look at the key thresholds that exist for the attack powers of the core Pokemon in that meta. Now, the general philosophy is that you want to build decks and you want to play matchups in a way that keeps your Pokemon's HP above those important breakpoint thresholds, while also being able to hit for an attack power that exceeds those HP thresholds on the opponent's side. Now, doing this is really, really important, and understanding how to use tools like Giant Cape, Red, Rocky Helmet, and Blue in order to put your Pokemon inside those thresholds or outside of those thresholds in order to one-shot or survive a one-shot from your opponent. Understanding how breakpoints work and understanding what the key breakpoints are in all of the core meta decks is absolutely essential and dictates a lot of how you not only build your deck, tweak your deck as a meta evolves, but also make decisions within each individual matchup. For the fifth tip, I want to talk about bluffing. Now, I'm just going to go ahead and say it. Bluffing is definitely not the most overpowered technique that you can use in order to find success on the ladder. However, it is really handy to have in your back pocket when you need it, particularly as you enter higher ranks where players tend to know the cards that you run in your deck and how your deck is most optimally played. Now, the first version of bluffing I'm going to talk about is holding back in evolution. The idea here is that you would have something like a Magikarp on your bench, loading it up to 3 or 4 energy, and while doing so, you hold back your evolution. You hold back that Gyarados in order to convey to your opponent that you don't have it. Now, the idea here is that you want to try and bait your opponent into thinking that you don't have that Gyarados. So maybe they commit into the active spot, swing into your active Pokemon, thinking that you have no way of retaliating. The next form of bluffing your opponent is by using a Sabrina in order to try to convey to them that you have a particular set of combo pieces that you could use in order to take them out or to target a key Pokemon on their bench. A good example of this would be maybe you have something like a stage 1 evolution, a Charmeleon powered up to 4 energy sitting in the active spot, and you bricked on finding your Charizard. Now, you don't want your opponent to know this, and you'd ideally like to buy yourself an extra turn to find that Charizard. So what you do is you throw up the Sabrina at the very beginning of your turn, make them think like you have the Charizard, and that if they bring in their closer in the back, you'll be able to easily take it out. Instead, they decide to bring in another Pokemon that's on their bench, most likely one that doesn't have energy, and now that Pokemon is stuck in the active spot, and they then are required to have to either put energy on it or use a resource to retreat it in order to be able to swing into you on their turn. A lot of times something like this can buy you a crucial extra turn and put your opponent in awkward spots where they're unsure what you're doing or how you want to play out the rest of your turn. Now, like I said, bluffing is something that has a lot of nuance to it, and in my opinion, only really works well at the higher ranks where opponents generally expect you to play the most optimal way, and they really know and understand what cards are in your deck so you can actually bluff having those. For the sixth and final tip of this video, I actually want to talk through a collection of tips and strategies that I believe are some of the remaining tactics you can use to have success on the ladder. Now, the first of those revolves around deck building. Now, when building or choosing a deck, it's really important that you understand the meta that you are playing in. And so one thing that I really like to do is take a look at some of the top tournament finishes from the previous weekend on limitless.gg, and then use that as an indicator for how the meta is going to shift and essentially what decks you will see on the ladder that following week. Usually the top 10 performing decks that previous weekend tends to be a reflection of the decks you're going to see and how the meta is going to shift. This gives you important time to be able to prepare, tweak, or even change decks altogether in order to best prepare for that shifting meta. Now, the next tip that I want to talk about is when actually playing your deck and your matchups. It's really important that you understand exactly what decks you are going to face, how those decks are played, and the cards that exist in those decks. Now, when doing this and playing against those decks, one of the most important things you can do is to constantly be calculating the probability of all of your actions, all of your outs, and all of your win conditions. You should always know what cards remain in your deck and the probability of drawing any of the important cards that you are looking for. In addition, you should always be looking at the discard pile of your opponent's deck and trying to evaluate what cards they have in their hand, what cards they have in their deck, and what might be the probability for them of drawing those particular cards. This provides you with extremely important information so you can start weighing your decisions and understanding how much weight do you put into a particular strategy and what backup strategies do you need to have based off of the probability or likeliness that a particular one of them will play out. Now, it sounds really complicated, and sometimes it does require you to take a little bit of extra time on your turn, and that is totally okay. What's important is that you don't rush into making decisions. You think multiple steps ahead. You simulate all the different scenarios that can happen and the probability of them happening, and then you tend to want to play out to the best outcome or the best probability that you have in front of you or that you are aware of. Now, if you're able to do all of these things, calculating probability, learning and educating yourself on the meta, predicting how the meta is going to shift and making important tweaks to your deck before that meta fully does shift, you will put yourself in an incredible position to win way more games and climb the ladder incredibly quickly. All right, trainers, and to summarize, I think we can all agree that RNG or luck does play a role in the game of Pokemon Pocket. However, if you think about the hundreds of games it's going to take you in order to climb to Master Ball rank in a particular season, that RNG tends to balance itself out or flatten out, really leaving skill expression as the primary way that great players separate themselves from the pack. Now, I truly believe that the tips and tricks that I walk through here are some of the key ways that you can improve your win rate, reduce the number of games it ultimately takes to get to Master Ball, and honestly, reduce the amount of stress that it takes to climb the ladder. Now, if you like this video or content like it, feel free to like or subscribe, and don't hesitate to watch any of the other videos that I created walking through my journey to Master Ball rank within the first week of the ladder and a 72% win rate.